Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have the Reverend K. Alice Daly with us. She is from the Church of Scientology and also has been a longtime friend, member, and an integral part of the Interfaith Council of Greater Sacramento. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, John.
Tell us where you were born and raised and some about your family and your parents and siblings and any of those sorts of things.
Sure. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and third generation native, proud of it kind of thing. And, you know, my grandparents were notaries in the financial district together, worked together, and so I grew up there. My folks were involved in real estate in the city and very active in terms of the UN, and that's part of where I think some of my interest in human rights and interfaith started budding, really.
Did you grow up right in San Francisco?
Yeah, I went to Lowell High School, and then I went to UC San Diego and UC Davis, and you know, have a lot of friends. Have a big actual 40th reunion coming up.
Good. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a disabled brother, David, who lives in Marin County, and he's thriving. Actually, he's doing great. He does all the Special Olympics, and I go with him to all the Special Olympics events. You know.
Oh, nice. Are your parents still living?
No, they're gone. So I'm his main support system. But fortunately he's a great brother. So. Did
you have time and energies with your grandparents?
I was very close to my paternal grandmother, and my grandfather I never knew. And my grandfather, Patton, I never knew either, but he was a fiddler in Kentucky and a coal miner in Colorado, and my grandfather was a notary who played the mandolin, so it was a pretty musical family. But my grandmother had the one distinction of being the runner-up for Herb Cain's Little Old Lady of San Francisco, because much along my line she was Jewish, and she told dirty jokes to the Catholic lawyers down the financial districts about the nuns. So they recommended that she was a character.
Were you happy growing up in San Francisco?
I was very happy. I was blessed with the fact of having parents who deeply loved each other and were happily married for 51 years and were holding hands till they passed, you know. So my brother and I never doubted for affection, and I with the different things that I handle during the day, I find that that's a unique situation.
Was it a happy home of religion?
Our religion was an interesting thing in my family. My mom was brought up as a Baptist, fairly evangelical Baptist, and my dad was brought up as Reformed Jewish, and neither of them felt very strongly about their faiths. So I was brought up, and mainly it wasn't a choice that they made at the time. So I was brought up as a Unitarian, attending the First Unitarian Church in San Francisco on Franklin, and that worked at the time, but strangely enough, I was a kid that kept seeking religion. I took myself to Lutheran Bible camp, which my mom found shocking that I was requesting this. And I took San Francisco, as you know, is highly diverse, so I had Buddhist friends that I'd say, Mom, can I go to temple with my Buddhist friends? She goes, where are you getting all this interest? You know, so I you know, went with my Russian Orthodox friend to church with her in San Francisco, and you know, I was searching and very curious about faith.
Before we go further, faith, let's talk about hobbies. What did you do young, and what are you doing these days?
Sure. Well, I started horseback riding in Golden Gate Park. There was a stable there, and that became a love. I wouldn't necessarily say it's something I'm good at, but I can at least stay on a horse, and I enjoy my time with horses. One time I helped deliver a horse, and that was a real favorite moment. But I also, since a very young age, I, you know, would submit things into the San Francisco Chronicle drawings, and one time I told my mom that I was going to win at the age of 4, and she tried to say, you know, well, now, honey, there's a lot of little kids, you know. So and I won. So then, of course, that became a righteous moment, because I knew, So I've always loved art and studied art, and I've drawn fashion since I was about 6. My mom kept all my sketchbooks, and so when I told my family that I was going to start an Italian design company, they were going like at the age of, in my 50s, they were like, it's about time. So nobody was surprised. That particular endeavor didn't take off the way I wished it to, but I developed some great knowledge, and interest in that area of design.
Do you have good fashion taste?
Well, one always hopes. I mean, it's something that you always, I feel I have a good sense of what looks good on people. I like to think I know what looks good on me. And I think what's important is that, I think it's just nice to present yourself in an artistic way so that, you're enjoying how you look, somebody else can feel an aesthetic sense. And I think that's just kind of a nice thing for men and women. So, yeah, I do things on the side, like I will take people shopping and help them design a certain look or help them with their closet. I mean, it's just an interest to me. I really enjoy it.
Clothing.
Clothing's a thing. Textiles. Something about textiles. I've read scads of books, anything from the history of costume design to medieval, why fabric ages the way it does and things like that. And I really, really enjoy that. To an extent, I'm actually even starting a current endeavor. The website is, the domain is named sfgurl.com, GURRL.com. It's not fully built yet or anything, but, keep an eye out for it because it'll be about San Francisco design and fashion, and it will have some people doing columns on fashion, color sense, how to use it, how to look good at any age or any size, and I think that's important. I do find, being a larger person, that it's a lost art. Some people kind of throw in the towel. So I think it's a really nice thing to offer that to people, that, you can have a sense of aesthetic no matter where you are on the charts.
Size is kind of overrated anyway.
Well, certainly I would have that opinion.
But it is, unless you're this wide.
Yeah. And even the
overrated.
fashionistas are kind of going, hey, let's be real, we're starving ourselves here,
Going back to horses for a minute, I spent a fair amount of time on a horse until I got out of high school.
I didn't know that.
And then I went most of 30 years without even being on a horse. And in Mexico several years ago, my wife and I decided sort of, the day before, we'd go out horseback riding with some people, and just riding out into the jungle sort of thing.
Right.
But on the way back, it was a hot day, and it is Mexico, and on the way back, one of the women up in front of us, a couple of the horse crossing the river, just decided, it's hot and I'm going to stop. And he just laid down gently. It threw her, but it didn't hurt her. She just big splash in the river. And then he just wanted to swim around while she was frantically trying to get to shore, At which point in time, everybody got off their horses. The horses played a bit. The people played in the water.
That's great.
It worked out really, really nice. And what sort of started out to be, oh dear, turned into kind of a fun thing for everybody.
That's great.
Now, you went to college.
Yeah.
How then did you come eventually in your adulthood to Scientology?
Well, I'd been studying Hinduism. I had arrived through all my different studies in my life at an interest in Eastern faith. And so I had been studying Hinduism for, I guess it was 3 or 4 years, and I had been trying to do everything that I could find about that faith, and was eating vegetarian and was meditating regularly and knowing other Hindus and everything when I was at Davis. And while I was studying an early education plan for, how to educate kids, young kids, which has always been a very strong interest of mine. I feel it's very important. At that point, somebody spoke to me about Scientology, and I started comparing it, and I thought, well, it can't hurt. I think I'll study this now a little bit, and I won't give up my other beliefs, but I'll study this and see what I think. And so I kind of made a pact with myself at that time, like I did with anything that I studied that looked like it might have meaning to me, that, well, if I find that I disagree with this, at that point I'll stop, and I'll have that freedom to just stop. So that was about 40 years ago. It was when I was about 21, something like that, 20 at this point. So that's how I came into it, is somebody actually spoke to me about it when I was at Davis. And I found it enthralling. It was an interesting subject.
Now, I know you've studied and trained for
Yeah.
the ministry. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, initially I trained to teach the classes because that was the simplest thing to train as. It took the least amount of time to train. And part of what I wanted to do in my ministry was work in the jail system. Being a middle class person in San Francisco, I hadn't had a lot of exposure to crime. And so I reached into that area. So I found myself supervising classes at Vacaville, California Medical Facility, inside with prisoners, and that was a meaningful experience to me. I taught communications, which we had a great time. It was a little scary sometimes, but it was a good lesson for me, and it was good ministry. And then after I did that for a while, I worked up at a new school that the church had started up in Oregon called the Delphian School, and it was a live-in school for anybody, not Scientologists, limited to that, but that I really liked the structure of with my early education, and gave kids the freedom to pick subjects they wanted to learn, but within a certain, and go at their own speed, because the way you work with classes in Scientology is people work off of what's called a check sheet, and they can go at their own speed and then get teaching assistance as they move along. So it doesn't actually make it so that you're rushing to catch up with other people. You're going at your own speed, and then you're learning. There's a lot of emphasis with dictionaries and understanding word derivations so that you get a good conceptual understanding of what you're reading. And we as a church feel like that's very much missing in current education, that people understand things phonetically and really learn their own language. So that's something we endeavor to put in. But then at a later time, I started to really find that I wanted to understand people spiritually more, like how could I help them, directly. And so I started training in the counseling techniques, and my mom had a master's in social work at UC Berkeley, and so we would compare notes of what our training experience was like. And she always had to, in her master's program, record things. She never had to video or do anything like that. She just had to tape with the person's permission the session, and how she addressed different issues. Whereas in Scientology, while it's considered such a newcomer in some ways, it's been here since the 50s, anytime you're doing a session with somebody and you're training, when you're training, it's understood and you're permitted to do a video. And you are videoed in terms of your own personal demeanor and how the person is responding. And those tapes are kept confidential with the person's counseling records and eventually erased. But it's a very good learning lesson to see how you express yourself and what you could do to alienate somebody. So it was a profound experience. I've been a practicing counselor for about 29 years.
And the counselor came at the same time you would become a reverend?
Yes, you have to do your ministry once you decide to counsel. That, in fact, you do the ministerial training before you do that. Now,
I've been to services with you, and a couple of things I really, really enjoyed. One was the friendliness and camaraderie, but I liked the humor, that life doesn't have to always be so serious and sort of grudgingly tramp along. Do you carry that over into your ministry and your counseling?
Yeah, I do, and I think that's such an interesting thing that you bring up, because it's nice to hear it from somebody having exposure to it in that service and stuff. Insouciance is important. I mean, it's not always the right thing depending on the situation, but humor, while it isn't necessarily something that we instruct somebody to act that way, when you have true affection for people and you're really interested in trying to figure out problems with them, you have to have some humor, because people will have situations in their life that are created in such ways as to really obstruct themselves, and you know, you have to help them find the humor in that sometimes.
My grandfather said to me in high school, "Don't take yourself too serious because nobody else is going to."
Right, right.
So, yeah,
That's a good one.
Found that out
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
Now let's see. How long have you met in the place in Midtown that you meet?
Okay, so in Midtown, gosh, I think it's been about 28 years, maybe.
And you're getting ready to move into a new facility next year, and you're
At
doing
J
fundraising.
Street. Yeah, J Street and 7th. Yeah, we're in the final throes of fundraising. But we've been fundraising for 8 years.
And that's the old Hotel Ramona?
The Ramona, and we're restoring it. We're restoring it to all the historical standards. We've been meeting with the Historical Society, but we're also doing something that we feel as a congregation is important in the capital, and it's been an extra expense to us, but making it what's called a LEED Gold standard. And so, which means we're building with a lot of recycled materials. We're setting up different ways of the air conditioning and stuff so that you know, it can be most effective, especially in the heat that we get in Sacramento, and has recycling built into it. So
Blesses the environment.
it blesses the environment, and what's great is it'll have community access where you can have meetings there. It's very nicely. I was there actually having a dinner for further fundraising just a couple nights ago. We were looking at all the earthquake proofing because this is an old building. I believe it's 1917 or something.
Well, you showed me plans and future looks at it, and it looks like it's going to be a terrific facility.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We're going to be doing some tours through it very shortly, and but when we went there the other night, we could see how it was. You know, the thing about a Scientology church is probably a valid point that some people just don't know. When you think of it as something that is secretive, it's the furthest thing from the truth. It is a wide open kind of thing. I think if you're to make an accusation, or if one was to make an accusation that it's some sort of society that's secretive or keeps to itself, well, it's one of those things where, so then if you tell people about yourself, then you're proselytizing. And, you know, so gee whiz, how do you actually get people to know who you are? It's one of the reasons I was looking forward to doing this show, is because it gives me kind of an opportunity to at least say my piece about it. I figure I know something after all this time. But, you know, this church will have all sorts of access. I mean, and groups of Scientologists involve themselves in a lot of different efforts. I mean, there are several Scientology kids just last week who were involved in a flash mob dance thing, and they just surprised all the runners, and, you know, it had nothing to do with Scientology. I mean, there's a lot of different works that go on with people who make no announcement of who they are, where they're from, who just happen to be working side by side. That happens far more often than you might think.
Well, being a good old Mormon boy, I understand your concept very, very well.
Yeah.
Listen, tell us a little bit about Ron Hubbard, will you please? The viewers
Sure.
would like to know more about that.
Mr. Hubbard, I personally never met, but I have met his daughter, and I've known many people that have worked with him. What I understand about Mr. Hubbard is that he had a great sense of humor. He had also a very intelligent guy, always curious. And so if he didn't get an answer to something, then he could spend days, hours, months, even years in some cases, researching something until he got a result that made sense to him. So he has a lot of writings that the church uses for its reading. In the church, he is revered, respected. Some people think that we deify him, but that's actually not the case at all. He's just respected as a person who's done a lot of hard work to research human problems, you know, and so we're thankful that he did. But that's where that's the beginning and end of it. But friends of mine that have worked with him said that he had an amazing insight and humor about the way that he would look at mankind, his affection, and his interest in solving problems and helping people live a better life was remarkable, and maybe sometimes hard to understand that somebody would be so riveted and determined to solve these problems, you know, and spend their entire lifetime doing it.
Is the Church of Scientology growing?
My understanding is that it's growing quite a bit. I don't have all the facts and figures on it, but you know, we have new churches growing in different places all over the world. You know, I don't know how many we have at this point, to be honest with you, but I do know what I've seen, and it's pretty remarkable.
Now, I know the answer to this already, but do you consider yourself a God-fearing woman?
Yes, I do, actually. I believe in God, and I believe that God lives in each one of us also. I mean, I believe that we answer to a higher power, and I don't believe, from my belief, that it has a sexuality or that it's a he or she. I don't determine it that way. But I believe in a spirit that drives us all and that makes us better people.
Now, you have a really fine husband, and you've got a big, strong, handsome son.
I know.
Do they practice?
Yes, they do. John works with computers, and actually it was I that spoke to him those many years ago and said, you know, you might find this subject interesting. We were working at a restaurant together. We were a waiter and waitress, and we met at the restaurant, and I said, you might study this, and he's been studying it ever since. And you know, my son also moved in with us, actually. He's my stepson. And he was concerned when he first moved in with us that, he says, well, you guys, you can't convert me to Scientology. And I said, no, you're absolutely right. You know, you can live in this house and respect my faith, and I'll respect yours, whatever it is. And so we did. And a few years later, he said, you know, can I have some of that counseling? And I said, yeah. So he's ended up very involved in the church, and he's very happy about it, and he's happily married and has good understandings with his wife, and they plan to live the rest of their lives together, and they work towards having a good family, and we endeavor to have good communication with all of our family, you know, which is, as you know, challenging sometimes, but we do our best.
Family's what it's all about.
That's right. It's a serious value.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Do you consider Sacramento to be a religious, God-fearing town?
Well, not in all ways. Religious, yes. I don't know that I consider it God-fearing. I do consider that it is diverse. I, for a long time, carried the torch for San Francisco. I have to say, I did. Well, you know, I don't know. I just feel so strongly about my old city. And then it kind of dawned on me that I was continuing to live in Sacramento. And I started looking at my reasoning on that. And what I discover is that Sacramento is unique in that there are so many good people from so many different faith-based groups, so many different religions. And all of us have our opinions. And we're all passionate about our opinions. But we respect each other. I don't know, I've seen that in too many places where there's just honest dialogue with no effort to proselytize, but just really have great understanding. And Sacramento's unique that way to me.
One of the great old Christian hymns that I like is Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get people to walk closer to God?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Well, I think, you know, we're planning an event in 2012 that you and I and many others are working on to create more awareness of interfaith up here in Sacramento and statewide. I think that religious values and having somebody attain to a higher power is so important. You know, I think that walking with God, no matter how your faith determines what that means, that's a good thing to walk with. You know, that's very important because, and to answer you fully, the way that you do that, I think having dialogues like we're having today, going to other churches, temples, synagogues, and seeing how they conduct religion. Last Sunday I went and saw Evangelical Baptist preach, and was wonderful. Beautiful service. I was completely engaged, and I loved hearing about Christ, and I sang with the best of them, whether they liked it or not. And that may not have been a big selling point for me, but you know, for hearing them hearing me. But growing up with Mahalia Jackson in my living room all the time because my mom played Mahalia, I was right at home.
Interesting, because she was on the old Magnavox in our home.
Is that right?
She
Yeah.
could really belt it out.
Yes, she could.
Do you think it's important that our community and civic leaders be religious people?
Well, honestly, here's what I think about that. Would I prefer it? Yes. More important than anything, I would prefer that they have an open heart to all faiths, because whether they're religious or not, I mean, we're in America, and I'm very glad and feel blessed for that, I tell you. But I really hope that they have an open heart and actually endeavor to understand everybody and not rule anybody out, more importantly.
We really like that there are all nations, kindreds, tongues, and peoples in our neighborhoods, our schools, and you know, these days it's our grandchildren in school, and they have friends of every size and shape and color of skin, and we really like that. It enriches and enlarges the personality, and you're not just some little guy over in your own corner doing your own thing.
It's reality.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, if you could wave a magic wand and make something happen for good in our city and county and state, what would that be?
It would be that people actually came together and really tried to understand each other fully and respect each other. I think we get a lot farther than we do with the misunderstandings and lack of effort to understand each other.
Why aren't we understanding better?
Truthfully, you'll be surprised at my answer. We don't know how to study. It started at a very early age, and we simply never got it since then. So I'm, you know, I have teaching basics in me. So I look at that, you know, it's a matter of really knowing how to understand even the words somebody's saying to you so that you can actually interact correctly and have a compassionate interaction.
Are you a good studier?
Yes, sir. If there's one thing I am, I can study.
Very good. Thank you. Our time is up. We appreciate you being here. It's fun to visit with you.
You too. Pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.